stories. The story today is Arabian Nights, and we'll probably be continuing for at least 1 week, possibly longer. And do, again, please double check that your microphones are off, and off we go. If you're not familiar with Arabian Nights, it's a huge, long book. Lots and lots of stories. So we will start nearly at the beginning and see how far we get. The first one is the introduction of Scheherazade. Chronicles of the ancient kings of Persia, who extended their empire into the Indies and as far as China, tell of a powerful king of that family, who dying left 2 sons. The eldest, Shahryar, inherited the bulk of his empire. The younger, Shahzaman, who like his brother Shahryar was a virtuous prince, well beloved by his subjects, became the king of Samarkand. Now after they had been separated for 10 years, Shahryar resolved to send his vizier to his brother to invite him to his court. Setting out with a retinue answerable to his dignity, that officer made all possible haste to Samarkand. Now Shahzaman received the ambassador with the greatest demonstration of joy, and the vizier then gave him an account of his embassy. Shahzaman answered thus: "Sage vizier, the sultan does me too much honor. I long as passionately to see him as he does to see me. My kingdom is in peace, and I desire no more than 10 days to get myself ready to go with you. There is no necessity that you should enter the city for so short a time. I pray you to pitch your tents here, and I will order provisions in abundance for yourself and for your company." "Welcome, Lexi. You are precious." At the end of 10 days, the king took his leave of his queen, and he went out of town in the evening with his retinue, pitched his royal pavilion near the vizier's tent, and discoursed with that ambassador till midnight. But willing once more to embrace the queen, whom he loved entirely, he returned alone to his palace and went straight to her apartment. The king entered without any noise, and pleased himself to think how he should surprise his wife, whose affection for him he never doubted. So great was his surprise, when by the lights in the royal chamber he saw a male slave in the queen's apartment. He could scarcely believe his own eyes. "How," he said to himself, "I am scarce gone from Samarkand, and they dare thus disgrace me." And he drew his scimitar, and he killed them both, the slave and the queen, and quitting the town privately, set forth on his journey. When he drew near the capital of the Indies, the Sultan Shahryar and all the court came out to meet him. The princes, overjoyed at meeting, embraced and entered the city together, amid the acclamations of the people, and the Sultan conducted his brother to the palace he had provided for him. But the remembrance of his wife's disloyalty made such an impression upon the countenance of Shahzaman that the Sultan could not help but notice it. Shahryar endeavored to divert his brother every day by new schemes of pleasure and the most splendid entertainments, but all his efforts only increased the king's sorrow. One day, Shahryar had started on a great hunting match, about 2 days' journey from his capital, but Shahzaman, pleading ill health, was left behind. He shut himself up in his apartment and sat down at a window that looked into the garden. And suddenly a secret gate of the palace opened, and there came out of it 20 women, in the midst of whom walked the sultaness. The persons who accompanied the sultaness threw off their veils and long robes, and Shahzaman was greatly surprised when he saw that 10 of them were black slaves, each of whom chose a female companion. The sultaness clapped her hands and called out, "Masoud, Masoud!" And immediately a slave came running to her, and they all remained conversing familiarly together. When Shahzaman saw this, he cried, "How little reason had I to think that no one is so unfortunate as myself!" So from that moment he forbore to repine. He ate, he drank, and he continued in very good humor, and when the Sultan returned, he went to meet him with a shining countenance. Shahryar was overjoyed to see his brother so cheerful, and spoke thus: "Dear brother, ever since you came to my court, I have seen you afflicted with a deep melancholy, but now you are in the highest spirits. Pray, tell me why you were so melancholy, and why you are now so cheerful." Upon this, the king of Tartary continued for some time as if he had been meditating, contriving what he should answer, but at last he replied as follows: "You are my sultan and master, but excuse me, I beseech you, from answering your question." "No, dear brother, said the Sultan. "You must answer me. I will take no denial. Not even from you." Shandon for a time hesitated to reply, but not being able to withstand his brother's importunity, he told him the story of the Queen of Samarkand's treachery with the slave. "And this, dear brother, my Sultan, this was the cause of my grief. Judge whether I had not reason enough to give myself up to it." Then Shahryar said, "I cease now to wonder at your melancholy, but bless Allah who has comforted you. Let me know what your comfort is, and conceal nothing from me." So obliged again to yield to his Sultan's pressing instances, Shahzaman gave him the particulars of all that he had seen from his window, and then Shahryar spoke thus: "I must see this with my own eyes. The matter is so important that I must be satisfied of myself." "Dear brother," answered Shahzaman, that you may without much difficulty appoint another hunting match, and after our departure you and I will return alone to my apartments. The next day you will see what I saw." And so the Sultan, approving this stratagem, immediately appointed a new hunting match, and that same day the tents were set up at the place appointed. Next day the two princes set out, and stayed for some time at the place of encampment. They then returned in disguise to the city, went to Shahzaman's apartment. While they had scarce placed themselves in the window, when the secret gate opened, the Sultaness and her ladies entered the garden with the slaves. Again she called Musud, and the Sultan saw that his brother had spoken truth. "Oh, heavens! What an indignity! Alas, my brother, let us abandon our domains and go into foreign countries, where we may lead an obscure life and conceal our misfortune." "Dear brother," replied Shahzaman, "I am ready to follow, but promise me that you will return when we meet anyone more unhappy than ourselves." So they secretly left this place. Together they travelled as long as it was day, and they passed the first night under some trees. And the next morning they went on till they came to a fair meadow on the seashore, and they sat down under a large tree to refresh themselves. Soon they heard a terrible noise, and the sea opened before them, and there out of the sea rose a great black column ascending toward the clouds. They then were seized with fear and climbed up into the tree to hide themselves. And the dark column advanced towards the shore, and there came forth from it a black genie of prodigious stature, who carried on his head a great glass box, shut with 4 locks of fine steel. He came into the meadow, and laid down his burden at the foot of the tree in which the two princes were hidden. The genie opened the box with 4 keys that he had at his girdle, and there came out a lady magnificently apparelled and of great beauty. Then the genie said, "O lady, whom I carried off on your wedding day, let me sleep for a few moments." Having spoken thus, he laid his head upon her knee and fell asleep. Now this lady looked up into the tree, and she saw the 2 princes, and she made a sign to them to come down without making any noise. But they were afraid of the genie, and would fain have been excused. Upon this, the lady laid the monster's head softly on the ground, and ordered the 2 princes to come down, saying, "If you hesitate, I will wake up this genie, and he shall kill you." So the princes came down to her, and when she had remained with them for some time, she pulled out a string of rings of all sorts, and she showed them, and she said, "These are the rings of all the men with whom I have conversed, as with you. They are full 80 of them, and I ask your rings to make up the 100. The wicked genie never leaves me, but he may lock me up in this glass box and hide me in the bottom of the sea. I find a way to cheat his care. You see by this that when a woman has formed a project, no one can hinder her from putting it into execution." And then said the 2 kings, "Well, this monster is more unfortunate than we." And so they returned to the camp, and thence to their city. And then Shahryar. Hello, Serene. Hi, Serene. Welcome. We're over in Arabian World. You're pointing the right way. Feel free to step through the gate when you like. And then Shahryar ordered that the Sultaness should be strangled. He beheaded all her women with his own hand, and after this he resolved to marry a virgin every day and to have her killed the next morning. Geez, that doesn't sound like much fun. And thus every day a maiden was married, and at the end, and every day a wife was sacrificed. The report of this unexampled cruelty spread consternation throughout the city. and at length the people who had once loaded their monarch with praise and blessings raised one universal outcry against him. The Grand Vizier, who was the unwilling agent of this horrid injustice, had 2 daughters, the eldest called Scheherazade, and the youngest Dinizad. Now the latter, Dinizad, was a lady of very great merit, but the elder had courage, wit, and penetration in remarkable degree. Scheherazade studied much, and had such tenacious memory that she never forgot anything she had once read. Scheherazade had successfully applied herself to philosophy, physics, history, the liberal arts, and made verses that surpassed those of the best poets of her time. Besides this, she was a perfect beauty. All her great qualifications were crowned by solid virtue, and the vizier patiently loved a daughter so worthy of his affections. Welcome, Serene. One day, as they were discoursing together, she said to him, Father, I have one favor to beg of you, and most humbly pray you to grant it to me. I will not refuse you anything, provided it be just and reasonable. I have a design, she said, to stop the course of that barbarity which the Sultan exercises upon the families of this city. Your design, daughter, replied the vizier, is very commendable, but how do you intend to effect it? Father, since by your means the Sultan celebrates a new marriage, I conjure you to procure me the honor of being his bride. Now, of course, this means she would be slaughtered the next day, didn't it? This proposal filled the vizier with horror. Oh, heavens! Have you lost your senses, daughter, that you make such a dangerous request to me? You know the Sultan has sworn by his soul that he will never be married for 2 days to the same woman. And would you have me propose you to him? Dear father, I know the risk I run, but that does not frighten me. If I perish, at least my death will be glorious. And if I succeed, I shall do my... Somebody, I think, has a mic open. If you could just double-check it for me, I'd appreciate it. And if I succeed, I shall do my country an important piece of service. No, no, said the vizier to his daughter. Whatever you can represent to induce me to let you throw yourself into that horrible danger, do not think that I will agree to it. When the Sultan shall order me to strike my dagger into your heart, alas, I must obey him. What a horrible office for a father. Once more, father, said Scheherazade, grant me this favor, I beg you. Your stubbornness, replied the vizier, will make me angry. Why will you run headlong into your own ruin? I am afraid the same thing will happen to you that happened to the ass who was well off and could not keep so. Father, replied Scheherazade, I beg you will not take it ill that I persist in my opinion. In short, the father, overcome by the resolution of his daughter, yielded to her importunity. And though he was very much aggrieved that he could not divert her from her fatal resolution, he went that minute to inform the Sultan the next night that the next night he would bring him his daughter, Scheherazade. The Sultan was very much surprised at the sacrifice which the Grand Vizier proposed making. How could you resolve to bring me your own daughter? Sir, said the Vizier, it is not mine, but her own offer. But do not deceive yourself, Vizier. Tomorrow, when I put Scheherazade into your hands, I expect you will take away her life, and if you fail, I swear that you shall die. And so Scheherazade now set about preparing to appear before the Sultan. But before she went, she took her sister Dinizad with him, and she told her, My dear sister, I have need of your help in a matter of very great importance, and I must pray you to not deny it to me. As soon as I come to the Sultan, I will beg him to allow you to be in the bride chamber, that I may enjoy your company for the last time. If I obtain this favor, as I hope to do, remember to awaken me tomorrow an hour before the day, and to address me in the words like these. Say to me, My sister, if you be not asleep, I pray you that till daybreak you will relate one of the delightful stories of which you have read so many. And immediately, dear sister, I will begin to tell you one of the stories, and I hope by this means to deliver the city from the consternation it is in. And so Scheherazade's sister, Dinizad, answered that she would fulfill her sister's wishes. When the hour for retiring came, the Grand Vizier conducted Scheherazade to the palace and took his leave. As soon as the Sultan was left alone with her, he ordered her to uncover her face, and he found her so beautiful that he was charmed with her. But perceiving her to be in tears, he asked her the reason. Sir, answered Scheherazade. "I have a sister who loves me tenderly, and whom I love, and I could wish that she might be allowed to pass the night in this chamber, that I might see her and bid her farewell. Will you be pleased to grant me the comfort of giving her this last testimony of my affection?" And so Shahryar, having consented, her sister Dinarzade was sent for, and came with all diligence. The Sultan passed the night with Scheherazade upon an elevated couch, and her sister Dinarzade slept on a mattress prepared for her near the foot of her bed. An hour before day, Dinarzade awoke, and failed not to speak as her sister had ordered her to. Now Scheherazade, instead of answering her sister, asked leave of the Sultan to grant Dinarzade's request. The Sultan consented, and desiring her sister to attend, and addressing herself to the Sultan, Scheherazade began as follows. And that takes us to our first story of 1001 Tales. Clever bit of manipulating on Scheherazade's part, and we are fortunate in that we get lots and lots of stories. Welcome to those who arrived while I was speaking. Good to see you. And it looks like it's closed up. I saw a mic open, I think, in Kitely earlier, but it looks like it's gone now, so I think we're okay. So our first story is the story of the merchant and the genie. Sir, there was formerly a merchant who had a great estate in lands, goods, and money. He had numbers of deputies, factors, and slaves. One day, being under the necessity of going a long journey, he mounted his horse and put a wallet behind him with some biscuits and dates, because he had to pass over a great desert, you see, where he could procure no more provisions. He arrived without accident at the end of his journey, and having dispatched his business, he took horse again in order to return home. On the 4th day of his journey, being in want of refreshment, he alighted from his horse, and sitting down by a fountain, he took some biscuits and dates out of his wallet. And as he ate his dates, he threw the stones about on all sides of him. When he had done eating, being a good Mussulman, he washed his hands, his face, and his feet, and he said his prayers. And he was still on his knees when he saw a genie appear, white with age and of enormous stature. The monster advanced toward him, scimitar in hand, and spoke to him in a terrible voice, thus: "Rise up, that I may kill thee, as thou hast killed my son." The merchant, frightened at the hideous shape of the giant, answered, How could I have slain thy son? I do not know him, nor have I ever even seen him." "What?" replied the genie. "Didst thou not take dates out of thy wallet, and after eating them, didst thou not throw the shells on all sides?" "I do not deny it," answered the merchant. "Then," said the genie, "I tell thee thou hast killed my son, and the way was thus. When thou drewest the date stones, my son was passing by, and one of them was flung into his eye and killed him. Therefore I must kill thee." "Oh, my lord, pardon me," cried the merchant. "If I have killed thy son, it was accidentally, and therefore suffer me to live." No, I must kill thee, since thou hast killed my son." The genie then threw the merchant upon the ground and lifted up the scimitar to cut off his head. And when Scheherazade had spoke these words, she perceived it was day. Remember, Scheherazade is telling us these stories. She perceived it was day, and knowing that the Sultan rose betimes in the morning, she held her peace. "Oh, sister," said Dinarzade, "what a wonderful story is this!" "All the remainder of it is more surprising. You will be of mind if the Sultan will let me live this day and permit me to continue the story tonight." And Shahryar, the Sultan, who had listened to Scheherazade with pleasure, said to himself, "I will stay till tomorrow, for I can at any time put her to death when she has made an end of her story." And so, having resolved to defer her death till the following day, he arose, and having prayed, went to council. Now the Grand Vizier, the meantime, was in a state of cruel suspense. Unable to sleep, he passed the night in lamenting the approaching fate of his daughter, whose executioner he himself was destined to be. Now how great was his surprise when the Sultan entered the council chamber without giving him the horrible order he expected. The Sultan spent the day, as usual, in regulating the affairs of his kingdom. On the approach of night, retired with Scheherazade to his apartment. The next morning, before the day appeared, Dinarzade did not fail to address her sister.
My dear sister, if you are not asleep, I entreat you before the morning breaks to continue your story.
Now the Sultan did not wait for Scheherazade to ask permission, but said, Finish the tale of the genie and the merchant. I am curious to hear the end of this. Scheherazade immediately went on as follows.
Sir, when the merchant perceived that the genie was about to slay him, he cried out,
One word more, I entreat thee. I have goodness to grant me a little delay. Give me only time to go and take leave of my wife and my children, to divide my estate among them, O genie, as I have not yet made my will. And when I have set my house in order, I promise to return to this very spot and submit myself to thee. But if I grant thee respite thou asks, replied the genie, I fear thou wilt not return.
I swear by the gods of heaven and earth that I will not fail to repair hither.
What length of time requires thou? Said the genie.
It will take me a full year to arrange everything, but I promise thee, after that 12 months I have passed, and thou shalt find me under these trees, waiting to deliver myself and my head into thy hands.
Well said, Rick. About 80 years ought to do it. On this, the genie left him near the fountain and immediately disappeared. The merchant, having recovered from his fright, mounted his horse and continued his journey. But if on the one hand he rejoiced at escaping for the moment from a great present peril, he was on the other much distressed when he recollected the fatal oath he had taken, and wished truly that he had asked for 80 years instead of 1 year. Be that as it may, on his arrival home, his wife and family received him with signs of the greatest joy, but instead of returning their embraces, he wept so bitterly that they supposed something very extraordinary had happened, as it had. His wife inquired the cause of his tears and of his violent grief.
We were rejoicing at your return, and you alarm us all by the state of the mind we see you in. I entreat you to explain the cause of your sorrow, husband.
Alas, how should I feel cheerful when I have only 1 year to live? He then related to them what had passed, and that he had given his word to return, and at the end of a year to submit to his own death. So when they heard this melancholy tale, they were in despair. The wife uttered the most lamentable groans, tearing her hair, beating her breast. The children made the house resound with their grief, while the father mingled with his tears with theirs. The next day the merchant began to settle his affairs, and the first of all to pay his debts. He made many presents to his different friends, and large donations to the poor. He set at liberty many slaves of both sexes, divided his property among his children, appointed guardians for those of tender age, and to his wife he returned all the fortune that she brought him, and added much more as the law would permit. The year soon passed away, and he was compelled to depart. He took in his wallet his grave clothes, but when he attempted to take leave of his wife and his children, his grief quite overcame him. They could not bear his loss, and almost resolved to accompany him, all perish together. Compelled at length to tear himself away, he addressed them in these words.
In leaving you, my children, I obey the command of God. Imitate me, and submit with fortitude to this necessity. Remember that to die is the inevitable destiny of man. Only avatars may live on forever.
Having said this, he snatched himself away from them and set out. He arrived at the destined spot on the very day he had promised. He got off his horse, and seating himself by the side of the fountain with such sorrowful sensations as may easily be imagined, waited the arrival of the genie. I mean, as long as the servers stay up and all that anyway. And so while he was kept in this cruel suspense, there appeared an old man leading a hind, who came too near to him. Rick, I'm not sure dates in general are healthy. But in this case, I think it's don't throw the pits around. There appeared an old man leading a hind who came near to him. When they had saluted each other, the old man asked,
May I ask of you, brother, what brought you to this desert place, which is so full of evil genii, that there is no safety? From the appearance of these trees, one might suppose this spot was inhabited, but it is in fact a solitude, where to tarry is dangerous.
The merchant satisfied the old man's curiosity and related his adventure as we have this morning. The old man listened with astonishment to the account, and when it was ended, he said,
Surely nothing in the world can be more surprising, and you have kept your oath inviolate. In truth, I should like to be a witness to your interview with this genie."
Having said this, he sat down near the merchant, and while they were talking, another old man, followed by 2 black dogs, appeared. As soon as the other had told it, and added that this was the appointed day, and therefore he was determined to remain, also to see the event. Now the second old man, who was also thought it very curious, resolved to stay likewise, and sitting down, rejoined in the conversation. He was hardly seated when a third old man arrived, addressing himself to the other 2, asked why the merchant who was with them appeared so melancholy. They related the story, which seemed to the newcomer so wonderful that he also resolved to be witness to what passed between the genie and the merchant, and he therefore also sat down for the same purpose. They quickly perceived towards the plain a thick vapor, or a smoke, like a column of dust raised by the wind. And this column of dust, this vapor, approached them, and on its sudden appearance they saw the genie, who, without noticing them, went towards the merchant with his scimitar in his hand, and taking him by the arm, cried, "Get up, that I may kill thee, as thou hast slain my son." The merchant and the 3 old men were so horrified they began to weep, and they filled the air with their lamentations. When the old man who led the hind saw the genie lay hold of the merchant, and about to murder him without mercy, he threw himself at the monster's feet, and kissing them said, "O Prince of the Genii, I humbly entreat you to abate your rage, and do me the favor to listen to me. I wish to relate my own history, and that of the hind which you see here, and if you find it more wonderful and surprising than the adventure of this merchant, whose life you wish to take, may I not hope that you at least remit a 3rd part of the punishment of this unfortunate man?" After meditating for some time, the genie answered, "Good, I agree to it." So that brings us to the history of the old man and the hind. "So I am now going," said the old man, "to begin my tale, and I request your attentions." Oh, it's bottom of the hour. For my folks in Kitely, if you feel compelled to do so, you might want to do the stand up and jiggle a little bit so we don't get booted out. And also, are you? Serene's not with me. I'll mention there is a Metaverse tour at 1 o'clock, and you can find out information on that in the Kitely community, and we should be wrapped up by then. And you might enjoy going on the Metaverse tour of the hypergrids. You know, Isolde, I think, I'm not sure how that works, Isolde. I think it's only for landowners or something. Anyway, on we go. So, sorry, Inworldz folks. We have this little thing in Kitely. We're debating how long it is, but if you don't move for a certain amount of time, poof, you disappear. The history of the first old man and the hind. I am now going to begin my tale, and I request your attention. The hind that you see here is my cousin. Nay, more, she is my wife. When I married her, she was only 12 years old, and she thought, therefore, to look upon me not only as her relation and husband, but even as her father. What an interesting culture they have there in Genieland. We lived together for 30 years without having any children. This, however, did not decrease my kindness and regard for her. Still, my desire for an heir was so great that I purchased a female slave, who bore me a son of great promise and beauty. Soon afterwards, my wife was seized with jealousy, and consequently took a great aversion of both mother and child. Yet she was so well concealed her feelings that I, alas, never had a suspicion of them, until it was too late. In the meantime, my son grew up, and he was about 10 years old when I was obliged to make a journey. Before my departure, I recommended both the slave and the child to my wife, whom I trusted implicitly, and begged her to take care of them during my absence, you see, which would last not less than a year. And now was the time that she endeavored to gratify her hatred upon my son. She applied herself to the study of magics, and when she was sufficiently skilled in magics and that diabolical art to execute the horrible design she meditated, the wretch carried my son to a distant place, and there, by her enchantments, she changed him into a calf, and giving the creature to my steward, told him it was a purchase of hers, and ordered him to rear it. Now, not satisfied with this infamous action, she changed the slave into a cow, which she also sent to my steward. And immediately upon my return, I inquired after my child and his mother. Your slave is dead, she told me,
It is now more than 2 months since I have beheld your son. I do not know what has become of him." I was deeply affected at the death of the slave, but as my son had only disappeared, I consoled myself with the hope that, he would soon be found. 8 months passed, and he did not return, nor could I learn any tidings of him. The festival of the great Baram was approaching. To celebrate it, I ordered my steward to bring me the fattest cow I had for a sacrifice. He obeyed my commands, and the cow he brought me was my own slave, the unfortunate mother of my son. Having bound her, I was about to offer her up, but she lowed most sorrowfully, and the tears even fell from her eyes. And this seemed to me so extraordinary that I could not but feel compassion for her, and I was unable to strike the fatal blow. I therefore ordered that she should be taken away, and another cow brought to me. Now my wife, who was present, seemed angry at my compassion, and resisted an order which defeated her malice. "What are you about, husband?" she said. "Why not sacrifice this cow?" she said. "Your steward has not a more beautiful one, nor a more proper one for this purpose," she said. Wishing to oblige my wife, I again approached the cow, and struggling with the pity that held my hand, I was again going to give the mortal blow, when the victim a second time disarmed me by her renewed tears and moanings. I think he was moved by her. Moved. Anyway. I then delivered the instrument into the hands of my steward. "Take them," I cried, "and perform the sacrifice yourself, for the lamentations and tears of this animal have overcome me, have moved me." The steward was less compassionate than I. He sacrificed her. On taking off her skin, we found her greatly emaciated, though she had appeared very fat. "Take her away," said I to the steward, greatly mortified. "I give her to you to do as you please with. Feast upon her with any friend you choose, and if you have a very fat calf, bring it in her place." Now I did not inquire what he did with that cow, but he had not been gone long before a remarkably fine calf was brought out. Now, although I was ignorant that this calf was my own son, yet I felt a sensation of pity arise in my breast at the first sight of him. As soon as he perceived me, he made so great an effort to come to me that he broke his cord. He lay down at my feet with his head on the ground, as if he endeavored to seek my compassion, and would beg me not to have the cruelty to take away his life. He was striving in this manner to make me understand that he was my son. I was still more surprised and affected by this action than I had been by the tears of the cow. I felt a kind of tender pity and a great interest for him. To speak more correctly, nature guided me to what was my duty. "Go back," I cried, "and take all possible care of this calf, and in its stead bring me another directly." Now, soon as my wife heard this, she exclaimed, "What are you about, husband?" she said. "Do not, I pray you, sacrifice any calf but this one," she said. "Wife," answered I will not sacrifice him. I wish to preserve him, therefore do not oppose it." But this wicked woman, however, did not agree to my wishes. She hated my son too much to suffer him to remain alive, and she continued to demand his death so obstinately that I was compelled to yield. I bound the calf, and taking the fatal knife, was going to bury it into the throat of my son, when he turned his tearful eyes so persuasively upon me that I had no power to execute my intention. The knife fell from my hand, and I told my wife that I was determined to have another calf brought. She tried every means to induce me to alter my mind. I continued firm, however, in my resolution, in spite of all she could say, promising, in order to appease her, to sacrifice this calf at the feast of Baram on the following year. The next morning, my steward desired to speak with me in private. "I am come," said he, "to give you some information, which I trust you will afford you pleasure. I have a daughter who has some little knowledge of magic, and yesterday, as I was bringing back the calf which you were unwilling to sacrifice, I observed that she smiled on seeing it, and the next moment began to weep. I inquired her of the cause of two such contrary emotions. 'My dear father,' she answered me, 'that calf which you bring back is the son of our master. I smiled with joy at seeing him still alive, and wept at the recollection of his mother, who was yesterday sacrificed in the shape of a cow. These two metamorphoses have been contrived by the enchantments of our master's wife, father, who hated both the mother and the child. And this,' continued the steward, 'is what my daughter said to me, and I have come to report to you. Imagine, O genie, my surprise at hearing these words. I immediately went with my steward to speak to his daughter myself. I went first to the stable where the calf had been placed. He could not return my caresses, but he received them in a way which convinced me he really was my son. And so, O genie, remember he's telling the story to the genie back of the oasis. O genie, when the daughter of the steward made her appearance, I asked her if she could restore the poor creature to his former shape. Why, yes, she replied, I can. Ah, exclaimed I, if you can perform such a miracle, I will make you mistress of all I possess. She then answered with a smile, You are my master. I know how much we are bound to you. But I must mention that I can restore your son to his own form only on 2 conditions. Firstly, that you bestow him upon me for my husband, and secondly, that I may be permitted to punish her who changed him into a calf. And so, to the first condition I replied, I agree with all my heart. I will do still more. I will give you, for your own separate use, a considerable sum of money, independent of what I destine for my son. You shall perceive that I properly value the important service you do me. I agree also to the stipulation concerning my own wife. For a horrible crime like this is worthy of punishment. I abandon her to you. Do what you please with her. I only entreat you to spare her life. Well, I will treat her then, as she has treated your son. And to this I gave my consent, and I provided she first restored me my son. And so this fine damsel took a vessel full of water, pronouncing over it some words I did not understand. She thus addressed the calf. O calf, if thou hast been created as thou now appearest, be the all-powerful sovereign of the world, retain that form. But if thou art a man, and hast been changed by enchantment into a calf, reassume thy natural figure. As she said this, she threw the water over him, and he instantly regained his own form. As my son. My child, my dear child, I exclaimed. It is Allah who has sent this damsel to us to destroy the horrible charm which you are enthralled, and to avenge the evil that has been done to you and your mother. I am sure your gratitude will lead you to accept her for a wife, as I have already promised for you. He joyfully consented, but before they were united, the damsel changed my wife into this hind, which you see here before me, which you see here, genie. I wished her to have this form in preference to any other, that we might see her without repugnance in our family. Since that time, my son has become a widower and is now traveling. Many years have passed since I have heard anything of him. I have therefore now set out with a view to gain some information, and as I did not like to trust my wife to the care of anyone during my absence, I thought proper to carry her with me. And this is the history of myself and the hind. Can anything be more wonderful?
I agree with you, said the genie, and in consequence I remit to this merchant a 1/3 part of his penalty.
I guess he means he's only going to kill 33% of him, since his penalty is death. 1/3 part. That's better than nothing. And so, as soon as the first old man had finished his history, continued Scheherazade, the second, who led the 2 black dogs, said to the genie, I will tell you what happened to me, and to these 2 dogs which you see here. I am sure you'll find my history still more astonishing than that which you have heard. But when I have told it, O genie, will you forgive this merchant another 1/3 of his penalty?
Yes, answered the genie, provided your history surpass that of the hind.
And so this being settled, the second old man began as follows. Following is the history of the old man and the 2 black dogs. Prince of the Genii, you must know that these 2 black dogs, which you see here, and myself are 3 brothers. Our father left us when he died 1,000 sequins each. With this sum we all embarked in the same calling, namely as merchants. Soon after we had opened our warehouse, my eldest son, who is now one of these dogs, my eldest brother, rather, who is now one of these dogs, resolved to travel and carry on his business in foreign countries. With this view, he sold his goods, and he bought such kind of merchandise as was adapted to the different lands he proposed to visit. He departed, and was absent a whole year, was my brother. At the end of that time, a poor man who seemed to be asking charity, presenting himself at my warehouse. God help you, said I. You also, answered he. Is it possible you do not know me? On looking attentively at him, I recognized my brother. Ha!
My brother, I cried, embracing him. How should I possibly know you in the state you are in? I made him come in directly and inquired concerning his health and the success of his voyages and all. Ah, do not ask me. You behold me in me a token of my fate. To enter into detail of all the misfortunes that have suffered me in the last year, O brother, which have reduced me to the state you see me, would only be to renew my afflictions. And so I instantly shut up my shop, and I, putting aside all my own affairs, I took him to the bath. I dressed him in the best apparel my wardrobe afforded. I examined the state of my own business, and finding by my accounts that I had just doubled my capital, I was now worth 2,000 sequins, I presented my unfortunate brother with half of my own fortune. Let this, my brother, I said, make you forget your losses. He joyfully accepted the 1,000 sequins, again settled his affairs, and we lived together as we had done before. Now, some time after this, my second brother, the other of these 2 black dogs you see before you now, O genie, wished also to dispose of his property. Both his elder brother and myself tried every means in our power to dissuade him from his intention, but in vain. He sold all, and with the money he bought such merchandise as he considered proper for his journeys. He took his departure, and he joined a caravan. At the end of a year, he also returned, as destitute as his brother had been. I furnished him with clothes, and as I had gained another 1,000 sequins, I gave them to him. He directly bought a shop and continued to carry on his business. Now one day both my brothers came to me, and proposed that I should make a voyage with them for the purpose of traffic. At first I opposed their scheme. You have travelled, said I, but what have you gained? Who will ensure that I shall be more fortunate than you? In vain did they use every argument they thought could induce me to try my fortune. I still refused to consent to their design. They returned, however, so often to the subject that, after withstanding their solicitations for 5 years, I at length yielded. When it became necessary to prepare for the voyage, and we were consulting on the sort of merchandising to be bought, I discovered that they had consumed their own capital, and that nothing remained of the 1,000 sequins that I had given to each. I did not, however, reproach them. On the contrary, as my fortune had increased to 6,000 sequins, I divided the half with them, saying, We must, my brothers, risk only 3,000 sequins and endeavour to conceal the rest in some secure place, so that if our voyage be not more successful than the ventures you 2 have already made, we shall be able to console ourselves with what we have left and resume our former professions. I will give 1,000 sequins to each of you, keep 1,000 for myself, and I will conceal the other 3,000 in a corner of my house. And so we purchased our goods, we embarked in a vessel which we ourselves freighted, and we set sail with a favourable wind. After sailing about a month, we arrived without any accident at a port where we landed, disposed of our merchandise with great advantage. I, in particular, sold mine so well that I gained 10 sequins for one. We then purchased the produce of the country we were in order to traffic with it in our own. About the time when we were ready to embark for our return, I accidentally met on the seashore a woman, very handsome but poorly dressed. She accosted me by kissing my hand. Oh, what an accostement that was! Wish I could get accosted. Entreated me, she did, most earnestly, to permit her to go with me, and besought me to take her for my wife. I pleaded many difficulties against such a plan, but at length she said so much to persuade me, urging that I ought not to regard her poverty, and assuring me that I should be well satisfied with her conduct, that I was entirely overcome. I directly procured proper dresses for her, and when I had married her in due form, she embarked with me, and we set sail. Now, during our voyage, I found my wife possessed of so many good qualities that I loved her every day more and more. In the meantime, my 2 brothers, who had not traded so advantageously as myself, and who were jealous of my prosperity, began to feel exceedingly envious. They even went so far as to conspire against my very life, and one night, while my wife and I were asleep, they threw us both into the sea. Ungrateful bastard! My wife proved to be a fairy. Consequently, she possessed supernatural power. Now you may therefore imagine that she was not hurt. As for me, I should certainly have perished but for her aid. I had hardly, however, fallen into the water before she took me up and transported me to an island. As soon as it was day, the fairy, my wife, thus addressed me. You may observe, my husband, that in saving your life I have not badly rewarded the good you have done me. You must know that I am a fairy. I saw you upon the shore when you were about to sail, and I felt great regard for you. I wished to try the goodness of your heart, and therefore I presented myself before you in the disguise you saw.
You acted most generously, husband, and I am delighted to find an opportunity of showing my gratitude. But I am very angry with your brothers, nor shall I be satisfied until I have taken their lives." And so I listened with astonishment to the words of this fairy, and I thanked her as well as I could for the great obligation she conferred to me. And we're back. I think it was the two brothers sabotaged me there. Anyway, I listened with astonishment to the words of the fairy, and I thanked her as well as I could for the great obligation she conferred on me. "But, lady," said I to her, "I must entreat you to pardon my brothers, for although I have the greatest reason to complain of their conduct, yet I am not so cruel as to wish their ruin." I related to her what I had done for each of them, and my story only increased her anger. "I must instantly fly after these ungrateful wretches," cried she, "and bring them to a just punishment. I will destroy their vessel. I will sink them to the bottom of the sea." "No, beautiful lady," replied I, "for heaven's sake moderate your indignation, and do not execute so dreadful a design. Remember, they are still my brothers, and that we are bound to return good for evil." I appeased the fairy by these words, and soon as I had pronounced them, she transported me in an instant from the island where we were to the top of my own house, which was terraced. She then disappeared. I descended, opened the doors, and dug up the 3,000 sequins which I had hidden, and afterwards repaired to my shop, opened it, and received the congratulations of the merchants in the neighbourhood on my safe return. When I went home, I perceived these two black dogs, which came towards me, fawning. I could not imagine what they meant, but the fairy, who soon appeared, satisfied my curiosity. "My dear husband, be not surprised at seeing these two dogs in your house. They are your brothers." My blood ran cold on hearing this, and I inquired by what power they had been transformed into their present shape. "It is I," replied the fairy, "who have done it. At least it is one of my sisters to whom I gave the commission. She also has sunk their ship. You will lose the merchandise it contained, but I shall recompense you in some way. As to your brothers, I have condemned them to remain in this form for 10 years, as a punishment for their perfidy." Then, after informing me where I might hear of her, she disappeared. And so the 10 years are now completed, and I am travelling in search of her. As I was passing this way, I met this merchant and a good old man who was leading his hind, and here I tarried. And this, O Prince of the Genii, is my history. Does it not appear to you most marvellous?
"Yes," replied the genie, "I confess it is wonderful, and therefore I remit a second third of this merchant's punishment." And so when the second old man had finished his story, the third began by asking the genie, as the others had done, if he would forgive the remaining third of the merchant's crime, provided his third history surpassed the other two in the singularity and marvellousness of its events. The genie repeated his former promise. The third old man related his history to the genie, but as it has not yet come to my knowledge, I cannot repeat it. But I know it was so much beyond the others in the variety of wonderful adventures it contained that the genie was astonished. He had no sooner heard the conclusion than he said, "I grant thee the remaining third part of the merchant's pardon, and he ought to be greatly obliged to you all for having, by telling your histories, freed him from his dangerous position. But for this aid, he would not now have been in this world." Having said this, the genie disappeared, to the great joy of the whole party. The merchant did not omit to bestow many thanks upon his liberators. They rejoiced with him at his safety, and then bidding him adieu, each went his own separate way. The merchant returned home to his wife and children, and spent the remainder of his days with them in peace. "But, sir," added Scheherazade, "how wonderful those tales which I have related to your majesty may be, they are not equal to that of the fisherman." Now Dinarzade, observing that the Sultan made no answer, said, "Since there is still some time in this day, tell my sister, pray tell this history. The Sultan, I hope, will not object to it." So Scheherazade consented to the proposal, and Scheherazade went on as follows. Oh, but look at that. It's the top of the hour, so I guess we'll continue this next week. We'll pick up with the history of the fisherman.